Your source for everything paranormal. Parax.
Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Channeling History. We're here on the Parax Radio Network every Sunday night. Thank you for joining us. I hope that you understand that we're the only show where we speak to the souls that made things happen.
And I'm Connie Strohm, and I'd like to thank you all for tuning in to our show this evening. Tonight we're interviewing the spirit of Colin Powell, the former Chief of Staff and Secretary of State. He will answer many questions and give us his opinion on the events taking place in Russia and the Ukraine. Our chat room here at Parax is open, and we welcome any questions. Of course, we do have a list of prepared questions, but we always prefer to use those of our listeners.
We always try to give a small disclaimer before we start because we have no idea how the spirits are going to answer the questions. Now, we're going to be asking Colin many direct questions tonight, and I know that there will be listeners that are going to disagree with some of his answers. So the opinions or statements voiced on the show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect our opinions, those of the Parax Network or of our sponsors.
Last week, we had a fun interview with famous humorist and author Mark Twain. It was a great interview, and his opinion about our modern politicians are well worth listening to. All of our previous shows are available on our YouTube channel that's in the name of Barry Strohm and Podomatic.com under the name Channeling History, where you can download them or just listen to them for free. It's also available on Audible, iTunes, Spotify, and most of the other popular platforms. Please tell your friends about us so we can continue to grow our listenership.
Okay, tonight you're going to have a unique opportunity to submit questions to an individual that helps shape the current events that are taking place in our world today. Colin Powell was a true American patriot. His advisor to multiple presidents and his concepts helped shape our current military and a lot of the things that are taking place in Europe today.
So when we begin our channeling tonight, I will ask the questions and Barry will answer the questions in the words of Colin.
If you've listened to our show, you know that before we channel, we always say prayer of protection. There's evil out there, and we want to make sure that we are protected when we open a channel to the other side. So Connie will say the prayer, and we will get on with our guest.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God. Amen. Okay, Colin, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Would you like to begin with a message?
Yes, I would. I want to thank all of you for allowing me to do this. I haven't really been on the other side that long, just passed fairly recently. So I hope I can figure all this out from over here. I haven't really been able to contact anyone, but I can tell you that it's a very, very wonderful place. I was a very lucky person in my life. I managed to achieve quite a bit. I managed to be trusted by many people. And because many people trusted me, sadly there were times that people took advantage of me. But I know that you have a lot of very difficult questions. I also know that there are terrible things taking place in the world today. So I'm ready if you would like to begin with your questions.
Thank you. You were born in Harlem in 1937. Will you tell us about your childhood?
My parents didn't have an awful lot of money. They were very loving. They were good people. My mother would take me to church. She firmly believed in God, and there was never any doubt that that is where you should put your faith. Harlem pre-war was very, very different from what it is today. There were many of poor African Americans living there. The schools were not as good as they were in the rest of the city, but I was very lucky. I managed to get a pretty good education and got into college, which many of my friends were not able to do.
Yes, you graduated from City College of New York with a degree in geology, but went on to have a distinguished military career. How did that happen?
Well, I joined ROTC. I really wasn't enjoying college that much. I joined ROTC, was on the drill team, and I just really enjoyed what I was doing. I thought that I would love to have a military career. I knew that it was a difficult place for African Americans to advance at that time. Things were much different. But when World War II came along, many people changed their opinions. I mean, segregation was still a problem in the 1960s and 50s, but I worked very, very hard. I always tried to give people my truthful opinions, and because of it, I managed to be fairly successful.
Yeah, can you give us a little more explanation of what it was like to be an African American in the U.S. Army at that time?
Well, when you were in the southern areas and training camps, we were not allowed to go into bars. We were still thought of as secondary citizens. The Army was trying to do different things at that point. They were trying to make it much easier for African Americans, but it was still a very difficult time.
Yeah. Tell us about your first tour of duty in Vietnam.
I went over to Vietnam as a young officer, and I was with the infantry. I was very surprised to see just how brutal the war was. We had seen clips on the news, but it was really hard to comprehend just how terrible things were in Vietnam. It was a very, very dangerous place for our guys to fight. I actually stepped on a punch stick and got a very bad infection in my foot. The Viet Cong would often rub human feces on these pointed sticks to guarantee that you got a nasty infection from it. My foot actually swelled up and I had trouble getting around, and it cut my first tour of duty short.
Okay, in your second tour of duty, you were Assistant Chief of Staff for the 23rd Infantry Division. In March of 1968, soldiers from your division participated in the My Lai massacre. What really happened there?
What happened there was totally disgusting and sickening. The commanding officers had made the area a free kill zone, and when the infantry came into the different villages, they started to kill women, children, old men, anyone that was present. The officers at the time kept it a secret, and I had no idea what was taking place. Once the truth started to come out, we started to realize that our boys had really acted in a terrible fashion. I tried to do a report on it. I knew that the people, the opposition back home, was trying to end the war. There was so much division taking place. It was a very, very difficult situation. My superiors wanted me to try to downplay what had happened. Sadly, I did follow some of their advice. While I wrote some of the facts that were taking place. I guess I should have taken a much firmer stand. But in light of all the problems that the military was having at the time, they put me in a very difficult situation. And as I look back, I probably should have reacted differently to it.
Yes. In 1987, President Reagan appointed you to the National Security Council. What is your opinion of President Reagan?
I thought that Reagan was a superb president. I thought that he did what was very necessary at the time. He was serving in the heart of the Cold War. He knew that the Russians had many nuclear weapons, and just the same as we did. And he tried to open doors. He was not a perfect president, but I think when you look at how he made decisions during that period, that he kept the country safe. We had a strong military. And really, considering how dangerous a period it was a time of relative calm for our country.
From 1989 to 1993, you were the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff and achieved the rank of a 4-star general. In 1991, you oversaw Operation Desert Storm. Did Iraq have weapons of mass destruction?
We were told that they did. I should have spent more time researching and questioning individuals. The political leaders wanted to go in and drive Iraq from Kuwait. They needed an excuse. It was a time that it was very difficult to get support. Everyone feared that Saddam Hussein actually had chemical weapons. I don't think we ever felt that he possessed nuclear weapons at the time, but we thought that there was a real possibility that Russia would provide them for him. We were told that we needed to justify going in, and that weapons of mass destruction would be something that would turn the people in favor of a strong offense against them. When we got there, we never could find any weapons. Well, we found many conventional weapons. I believe that there was a time that Saddam actually did have chemical weapons. I think that they were removed because they anticipated that we would be coming in. I know that Saddam wanted the world to think that he had weapons of mass destruction. I think that if he had been able to prove that he did not, that it would have been much more difficult to get the public to favor what we were doing.
What was and is your opinion on gays in the military?
I was initially opposed to having gays in the military. I wound up convincing the president that he should pursue a no-tell situation. But I now know that I should not have taken such a strong position against gays in the military. Don't ask, don't tell was the policy for many years, but it certainly did create a second-class citizenry for the gay soldiers in the military. I should have been more open to it because there's actually no difference between the performance of straight and gay individuals in combat. It is something that I should probably not have been so determined about.
Tell us about your speech to the United Nations in which you assured them that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction.
I was told by the president and vice president that I should speak before the United Nations. They felt that it was very, very important that we had a strong coalition. They wanted to bring as many countries in as possible. I only had a couple days' notice before the speech. I did try to research things as best I could, but our own intelligence people were verifying that Saddam definitely had the weapons. I went in front of the UN and I made the speech that they wanted me to do. Sadly, when no weapons were found, it reflected very badly upon my career and upon me. I was always known as a straight shooter and a person that told the truth. I based the speech on the information I was given. I trusted the information, and I learned that quite often you should not trust. The one thing that should have stuck in my mind was you should trust but verify. Sadly, I was unable to verify it. And when we never found any weapons, as I said before, it reflected poorly upon me.
In the end, who was responsible for misleading the world over the weapons of mass destruction claim?
I think that there were many in the military that wanted the war. There were obviously many people supplying weapons and ammunition that wanted us to go into Iraq. There were many people that felt that if they could overthrow Saddam, they would be able to introduce democracy into Iraq and that everything would be fine in the future. I know that Vice President Cheney was a big pusher. I know that he never had any doubts about the weapons. I know that the president decided that he wanted to go into Iraq as well. I tried to counsel him against trying to democratize the country, that there would be nothing but problems, guerrillas, many people trying to overthrow the government. But when the military and political establishment makes up their minds, there's very few that can stand in their way.
Okay, we have a question out of our chat room. Why did you support the war after saying essentially that you wouldn't without an end game?
They assured me that there would be an end game. And when you're in the military, you have to follow the orders of the president. I gave you my honest opinion. Once your commanding officer makes an opinion, it is your duty to carry out his orders. I felt that I would be very effective as a wartime leader, and I felt that if we had to go to war in Iraq, that I would be able to enforce policies that would save many lives of our soldiers. Yes, if you disagree with your commanding officer, maybe you should resign. But I wanted to have a war plan that I felt would preserve the lives of our boys. And that was why I did not retire when I disagreed.
In 2001, George W. Bush appointed you as Secretary of State. Then on September 11th, terrorists attacked the Twin Towers. Did you have any indication the attack was going to occur?
We were given information that the Taliban or terrorists were going to carry out some kind of an act of terrorism. I had absolutely no idea where the terrorist act was going to take place. We tried to beef up our intelligence sources, but I did not have any idea that the attack on the Twin Towers was going to take place when it did.
Was the attack on the Twin Towers an inside job, and if so, who was behind it?
I am not aware of any inside influences concerning the attack upon the Twin Towers.
Okay. Why did George Bush remove you as Secretary of State?
He wanted to appoint Condoleezza Rice. She was well qualified. She was an African American woman. And he was becoming discouraged with some of the advice that I was giving him. I think that he wished that he had listened to me closer. And I was getting some bad press at the time. I think he just felt it was time for a change.
What is your opinion of George W. Bush?
I think that he is a good person. I think he tried to do what was right. I think he relied too much on those around him for advice. He was given some very bad advice through the years he was president, and I think that he made several bad decisions because of it.
Okay, you supported Barack Obama for president. What is your opinion of the job he did as president?
I think that in many ways, Barack Obama did a pretty good job. He opened up some avenues for African Americans, and I think he did some social programs that were needed at the time. I also think that he made quite a few foreign policy mistakes. He also relied a lot on his advisors that were around him. And many of his advisors were pushing programs that rapidly increased the size of government and rapidly increased the size of the deficit. I think that those two things, radically increasing the size of the bureaucracy of government and spending that created such a deficit, were probably the two things where he really failed in his presidency.
What is your opinion of Hillary Clinton?
I like the Clintons. I always got along with them. But when Hillary tried to get me involved with her server problem, she tried to create me as a scapegoat for it. She should have never done some things that she did. I think that Hillary showed that she would be very, very difficult to trust. I think that she has done things. I did not like the way she handled her defeat. I think that she should have been more professional about some of the comments she made after the election. My guess is that she is probably not finished with politics. And I think that I'm very happy that I'm now on the other side.
From our chat room, one of our listeners would like to know, Was Osama bin Laden killed by the SEAL team, or was he already dead?
He was killed by the SEAL team.
Okay, and while we're talking about presidents, one of our listeners would like to know, what was the reason that you didn't run for president?
I had thought about it. I always valued my reputation, and I always tried to do that was right. The higher I became as an advisor, the more I understood many of the pressures that are put upon a president. It takes a very, very special person to be president. You have to raise money for your campaign, and everybody that gives you money is looking for favors. And I just simply did not want to be involved in such a situation.
Okay, you were a critic of Donald Trump. Now that his term is over, what do you think he did wrong?
I think that the way Trump handled people was not a professional way to do it. The president should not speak of others in the way that Trump spoke of others. In the beginning, he had essentially no idea what was taking place in government. He made many mistakes in the beginning, and he trusted people he should not have trusted. I think that his personality is his biggest problem. I do think that he did some things right. He managed to build a relationship with some of our worst enemies. He was not afraid to speak to the leaders of China, North Korea. I think that he tried to get too close to Putin. I believe that Trump honestly thought that he could trust Putin. I do know that many of the other countries thought that he was a bit radical and unpredictable, and nobody really understood how he was going to react to certain situations. I do think that that uncertainty kept some of our enemies at abeyance while he was in office. I do not like the idea that a president of the United States would be involved in personal arguments and name calling. I think that that belittles the political office. I think that quite often his ego gets in the way of decisions that he should be making. I did not like many of the things that he said about me, and I firmly believe that there has to be somebody out there that is more qualified to be president than he is.
Okay, another question out of the chat room. What is your opinion of George Bush Sr.?
I thought that he was a good president. He did not do everything correct. I felt that he should have allowed us to finish the first Gulf War, and we stopped too soon. I think that that decision in the long run cost our soldiers many lives because we had to go back in and finish a job. But all in all, I believe he was a pretty good president.
Okay. What is your opinion of how Trump handled Russia?
I think that he could have done a better job with Russia. He felt that he could trust Putin, and I think he felt that he could trust the Russian people. The Russians throughout the ages have never had any problems lying to you to your face. I think Putin knew how to play Trump. I think that even though Putin did not act militarily during that period of time, I think that some of the seeds were laid that was going to result in much of what is taking place now. All right, let's take a short break here. We'll be back in a minute, and we have a lot more questions.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock for Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hi, this is Marla Brooks from Stirring the Cauldron. Thursdays are a great night on the Para-X Radio Network. We start off the evening with Journey into the Light, Chapter 3, with your hosts, Psychic Little T and Tabby Cat Gash at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then, on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 8 p.m., it's Tango and Friends, hosted by Bruce Tango. And on the alternate Thursdays at 8 p.m., tune in to Stirring the Cauldron, the Archive podcast. Every week at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me on Stirring the Cauldron Live. And then at 10 p.m., stick around for New Aeon Now with Lily Alley, Davron Michaels, and Christine Matza. Finally, to round out the night, join Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz on the Paranormal Encounters podcast. All this every Thursday, right here on Para-X.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. We've got a lot of ground to cover, and it's going to get very interesting.
Hey, Colin, why do you think Putin ordered the invasion of the Ukraine?
I think that he honestly felt that he would be able to win a rapid victory. I think that he felt that he needed to show a lesson to NATO. Putin definitely did not want NATO letting Ukraine become a member. I think that he felt that he could come in and in a few days have a quick military victory, and that would assure that there would never be any possibility that Ukraine would join. I think that he made some very, very serious miscalculations.
Agreeable. Do you think that NATO helped instigate the war with their actions?
I actually feel that NATO is part of the problem. I believe that the true answer would have been a neutrality agreement for the Ukraine. I think NATO held out a carrot of membership to the Ukraine. And then when the president that was favorable to Russia got overthrown, I suspect that NATO had a role in that as well. And then when you got more of a democratic president taking over, that Putin started to panic. I know that he definitely did not want NATO on that large border that the Ukraine had with Russia. I also feel that when he took over the Crimean earlier, that the penalties were not nearly great enough. I think he simply felt that he'd be able to come in, take over the country in a week or two. NATO wouldn't say anything, and he would accomplish on pushing the border further from Russia.
What is your opinion of the mental state of Vladimir Putin?
Putin is a very conniving and intelligent person. He has made himself billions of dollars being president of Russia. I think that he is an egomaniac, and I think that he is very, very paranoid. I think the paranoia led to the fear that NATO was going to be coming into the Ukraine and putting missiles on his border. I know now that his mental state has diminished. He is very emotional and his plans have not been carried out. He's very worried about the sanctions that are put against him. And I know that he is trying to turn to China for help. He has now put himself in a very difficult position. I think that his mental state at this point could probably be compared with that of Hitler at the end of World War II, when Hitler confined himself to his bunker. I know that Putin is basically confining himself to his bunker now. He's not associating with others. He's very paranoid for his life. It'll be very interesting to see how this plays out in the future.
Yeah, do you think he'll use nuclear weapons?
My opinion is I don't think he will. There are many countries now, especially associated with NATO, that have overwhelming nuclear weapons. He knows that if he would create a first strike, that there will be nothing left of Russia. The United States has thousands of weapons. The Minuteman ICBM carries 3 nuclear warheads. There is no possibility that Russia could survive a nuclear attack. He may attempt to use a small tactical nuclear weapon and try to intimidate the West into suing for peace. I do not think that the people around Putin would allow him to create a major first strike against Western countries, because they know they would certainly end in all of their own deaths. And essentially there would be nothing for him to rule over. Keep in mind that the Russian oligarchs and Putin himself have got billions and billions of dollars and live incredibly comfortable lifestyles.
Okay, what do you think is going to happen to Putin?
My personal opinion is that somebody will take care of the situation. The oligarchs have incredible power in Russia. They are losing billions and billions of dollars of their wealth. I think that there will be a time that Putin may possibly commit suicide. He just doesn't realize that he's going to be doing it.
Okay, our listeners seem to be very interested in the role that the U.S. is playing in this. How large a role are they playing in the defense of Ukraine?
They're playing a large role in the sanctions. They are supplying lethal weapons to Ukraine. I feel that there's much more that they should be doing. All the Ukrainian people want to do is kill Russians at this point. The members of NATO and the United States need to supply them with lethal weapons so that they can carry out the fighting. I do not believe that we're at a point that United States troops should be present in the Ukraine. I know that Putin is looking for an excuse, and the Western countries have to be very careful not to provoke him in giving an excuse, even though he will use all the lies he can think of to create a reason to expand the war.
If the Balkans are attacked, do you think NATO will protect them?
I don't think NATO has any choice in it. Now, they are later members of NATO. They're not one of the original group that formed it. I do think that if Putin does attack one of the Balkans, that NATO will indeed become involved.
Okay. If you were president, how would you handle the war in Ukraine?
This is one reason why I did not want to be president. I would go to Putin and I would explain to him that he will be cut off economically from the rest of the world. I think he's realizing that. I would tell him that if he expands the war, that we will definitely become involved. And if he makes any hint at using a nuclear weapon, that we will destroy Russia and he will have nothing left. I would tell him that he needs to make peace with the Ukraine. I would offer him a neutrality agreement. I would discuss it with the Ukrainians first, obviously, but I would assure him that NATO would not come into the Ukraine and that he immediately needs to withdraw his troops. If he did not follow that, then I would provide more advanced weaponry to him, to the people of the Ukraine. I would supply them with all the intelligence we could give them, and I would make life miserable for Russia.
Do you think President Biden is handling the war appropriately?
I don't think he's being aggressive enough in this. I don't think that he is laying out firm options. I do not think that he is supporting the supply of lethal weapons in the way that he should be doing. It was no secret that that Russia was going to attack. They were forming for months. That would have been the time to load the Ukrainian army with as many weapons as possible. I think he's been very slow to act, and I think there's much more that he should be doing.
Hunter Biden served on the board of Burisma Holdings, a Ukrainian oil and gas company, from 2014 to 2019, where he was being paid $50,000 a month. Will this create a problem for President Biden in handling the war in Ukraine?
I think that his son has created definite problems for him. I don't think anyone knows how much he has been involved with his son, or if indeed any money was given directly to him. I suspect that there are pressures being brought against him because of what his son has been doing, but I do not know if they have affected his decision making. I do know that he has been very slow to respond in reinforcing the army. As I said earlier, the attack was no surprise, and we wasted many months in supplying the weaponry that the Ukrainian army should have access to.
Do you think the Ukrainians have any chance to win the war?
If Putin decides to send the bulk of his army and forces into Ukraine, they will have no chance. He will just simply overpower them. However, we're finding out that the Russian army is not as great as we anticipated. A lot of their equipment is junk, and they have many vulnerabilities that we never realized that they had. It will be very interesting to see just how far Putin wants to go with this.
How do you see the war ending?
I see Putin realizing that he can't win, I think he will threaten nuclear attack. I think that he will try to get a neutrality agreement for Ukraine. An agreement such as that, maybe some of the land that he's overrun, would be the best that he can expect out of this. If he truly takes over the country, he's going to be faced with a guerrilla war that will just bleed him to death.
What do you think of our withdrawal from Iraq?
I think it was a mistake. I think it was poorly handled, just the same as I think it was poorly handled for the withdrawal from Afghanistan. For our country to leave all those weapons in place was inconceivable to me.
Yeah, I don't think President Powell would have done that. What role do you see Russia playing in the world politics in the future?
I see them playing a very small role in the future. They will be ruined economically. They will be embarrassed over what they've done here. And I think that many countries will turn away from their petroleum products, which is their source of income. So I can only see that they'll be diminished in the future.
What would you advise if Russia uses chemical or nuclear weapons?
I would advise that we strike very hard and very rapidly at the military forces in the Ukraine. If they use a nuclear weapon, I would use one in return. I would do exactly what they do, and I would make it very, very clear that Russia would be in ashes if they continue that policy.
Yeah. Do you see China helping Russia in the war?
Yes, I don't see any way that China can avoid helping Russia. If Russia were to fail, and if Western countries were to take over Russia, China would have all of their border with possibly NATO countries if Russia was truly defeated. China loves to have Russia between the West and their country.
How big a risk do you see China playing in the future?
They're very clear about their plan for world domination. They have a long-term plan. And if we continue to purchase all of the goods and trade with them and give them funding for their military, they will be a terrible opponent in the future. The United States needs to realize that they are the true enemies of the future. Russia has a very small economy. They do have nuclear weapons, and there needs to be some sort of policy in place that would reduce their weapons. But China is indeed the long-term danger for the United States and the free world.
How would you handle China?
I would begin to withdraw much of the economic goods that we buy from them. I would bring back the pharmaceutical industry to the United States. I would make the United States and the free world self-sufficient, that they would rely on China for nothing. I would make sure that they understand that if they attack Taiwan, that they would be attacking us as well. I would try to make an agreement with them, but I would make sure that in the long run, we were self-sufficient and quite capable of living without China.
Do you think China will attack Taiwan?
I don't think so. I think they're seeing that Russia underestimated the reactions of the rest of the world. And I think they're starting to understand that if they went into Taiwan, things would be very nasty for them.
But if they do go into Taiwan, will the United States help defend them?
Yes, I truly believe that there would be no hesitation in the defense of Taiwan.
What role do you see North Korea playing in the future?
I see North Korea attempting to bully the rest of the world. North Korea totally relies on China. I think that if we were to inform China that if they do not take an active role in demilitarizing North Korea, that we will be withdrawing all of our trade with them, that we will be not allowing them to invest in the United States, and that we will be basically stopping them in many economic areas. Only China can control North Korea.
What will happen when Iran gets a nuclear weapon?
Israel will attack them. They've been very clear about it from the start. The world has to understand that if Iran gets nuclear weapons, they will be in the hands of insane individuals.
Will anyone support Iran if they get involved in military action with Israel?
Possibly Russia and China, but I think they will have their hands full with their own problems. I think that Syria, because of their relationship with Russia, may get involved. But I think the bottom line is that the countries fear the retaliation of Israel.
Okay. Many people are fearful of the use of nuclear weapons. Can you see the future, and will they be used?
We can somewhat see the future, but we are not allowed to give any information that would interfere with free will and with life plans of individuals on the planet. It is my sincere hope that no one ever uses nuclear weapons.
You were pro-choice concerning abortion. Now that you're on the other side, have you changed your opinion on that?
Yes, it is quite obvious that God never condones the taking of an innocent life. Now that I'm over here, I have a better understanding of that. When I was alive, I tried to have some more liberal ideas, but I do understand that that is an idea I had that was not correct.
So while we're on the subject of heaven, one of our listeners would like to know, which realm are you in heaven?
I'm in the 6th realm.
That's a good one. Okay. You were very troubled by the January 6th attack on Congress by a mob. Now that you're on the other side, can you tell us any more about that attack?
I can tell you that there were other obstacles that were thrown into the apparent attack. There are many things that people do not understand about it. There are questions why additional security was not given when it was offered. There were many people in Congress that underestimated what was taking place. And there were individuals in that mob that were paid to participate. I know a lot more about it now. I do know there were things I did not understand. And I do think that there will be many things come public knowledge. There were many people that were traitors to our country in that time. And I do think there will be additional information in the future.
I hope so. What role do you see the United States playing in the future?
The United States has to be the leader of the world. They have to take firm stands. They have to understand that there are many countries out there that hate democracies. They have to rebuild strong alliances with Great Britain, Germany, France, all the other strong democracies of the world. They have to insert themselves into strong agreements with India. India is often underestimated. They need to attempt to have better relationships with India, with Pakistan if possible. They have to stop terrorism wherever they see it. The United States must be the strongest country in the world. If they lose that position, then evolution is definitely going to be a problem.
What do you consider the greatest accomplishment in your life as Colin Powell?
I think that I did a lot of good as Secretary of State. I think I managed to give good information, and I think that also I managed to lead the country at a very difficult time.
Colin, thank you so much for joining us this evening. It's really good to have your input on things. Do you have a final message for our listeners?
Yes, I tried to do my best in life. I worked very hard. I tried to be honorable, and I tried to be trusted. Sometimes I was taken advantage of, but quite often my advice was very good. I hope that the situations that are creating so much havoc in the world today will be resolved. I hope that there will be individuals come forward with calm minds. And I hope that finally people understand that they need to coexist in this one world. I thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I hope that you will all become active in electing individuals that will have your best interest at heart. So goodbye. Thank you for having me, and may God bless all of you.
Okay, next week we're going to be interviewing Alexander Hamilton, one of the founding fathers. You can submit questions or recommendations for future shows in advance through our email, channelinghistoryonparax@gmail.com.
Okay, and my new book, Spirit Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirit, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. It's available on Kindle. We've lowered the price to $2.99 so anybody can afford it. Signed copies of any of my books are available on our website, spiritspredict.com, or wordsofgodthenandnow.com. All of our shows are on Podomatic, iTunes, Spotify. You can see them all on our YouTube channel. They're in my name, Barry Strohm. I hope that you enjoyed tonight's show. I know that I enjoyed having the questions answered. I want to thank Colin Powell for coming through for us. He was always a great patriot, and I thoroughly appreciate it. So please join us on Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the Parax Radio Network.
And I would also like to thank you all for tuning in this evening, and I would definitely like to thank Mr. Powell for joining us. I wish he was still on this side. We could really use somebody with his knowledge and morals. Anyway, all of you, God bless you and have a great week.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.